online festival of ideas where we're discussing the question, what if we could redesign everything? So today we'll be discussing a new way to think about economic growth in our complex global environment. So I'm Leila Dilks-Hoffman, and I'm delighted to welcome Claire Rose and Marina Milani to join the discussion today. So Claire and Marina will be running today's discussion, and I'll be handing over to them shortly. But just before that, I wanted to remind you that this is an interactive session, and we're really happy to get your questions and comments. So please do contribute using the question box that will appear below this video live stream. So now over to you, Claire and Marina, who will introduce themselves, and really interested to hear what you have to share with us today.
Thank you, Lila. Hello, my name's Claire Rose, and this is my colleague, Marina Milani. I'm based here in Cambridge, UK, and Marina's based in Uruguay. And together we really want to put forward a new model for collaborative, innovation-led growth inside the sustainable economy. I don't know if Marina wants to say hello before we move to the slides. Say hello, Marina.
Oh yeah, so hello everybody. Thank you, Claire, for inviting me. And I don't want to say much yet, so I'll just let you kick off, and I'll complement your ideas and your thoughts by the end of it.
Okay, thank you, Marina. Okay, now I'm going to do the technical bit and swap to the slides, which is always difficult. Here we go. Right. Here we go. Sorry about this, guys. I've gone to the end. Here we go. This is what we're talking about today, 21st century economics and the new collaborative model that I developed here in Cambridge with some of my very lovely students, actually a couple of years ago now. And when the DIF came forward with this idea of 21st century economics, we thought, wow, what a fabulous place to share this new model. That's really what we're going to be talking today. And the model deals with the idea of mastering innovation-led economic growth in a planetary economic context. And there are really four key themes inside the model, and these are what I'd like to explore with you today. This is the model, lovely colors. What it deals with is this idea in the center of the model, this idea of opportunities for growth in less developed economies. And so what we're going to talk about today is we're going to talk about the ways in which we can build conditions for sustainable growth through four different things. I'm going to see if I can go back to that last slide because it's, no, it's only going forwards, which is not okay. Hang on, I've got a lovely technical hitch happening. There we are. The model itself is shot through the center with human core values. You can see those in the background. It's the grey arrow. Human core values are the things which I think will drive our sustainable economy moving forwards. You can see them through the center there. What we've got here is this idea of planetary economics, Kate Raworth's work on development and growth bounded by what's possible within a sustainable global economy. And then we've got sort of the environment in the background, the broader world environment, issues like moving from aid to growth and development through valuing human capital, political will, that sort of thing. And around the edge, we've also got all the people and the sorts of values that we want to include in our growth-based economy, but leveraging the missing middle. I'll explain what I mean as we go on. Essentially, there are four key themes, okay? The first is this beautiful pot of flowers that I've drawn for you, which is planetary economics. So what we're saying is that there is value in natural assets, and that came from Kate Raworth's work. The second is driven by the thinking of the United Nations, the fact that we should have human core values, that there are things like rights and respect and mutuality. There's a great deal of value in mutuality. The third idea inside the model is innovation-led growth. We find value in innovation, And the fourth comes from lovely work by Andreas Widmer and Poverty Cure on leveraging the missing middle value in small to medium-sized enterprise growth. So we've got these four different elements, four different strands of thinking. And what the model does is it takes them and mixes them all together. And you notice, because we're economists here today, we've all got this idea running through of value. So value in natural assets, value in mutuality, in working together properly and efficiently and kindly, value in innovation, and value in the SME sector. And in a moment, I'll show you the metrics on these things. And you'll begin to understand just how much competitive advantage, how much space for growth there is in putting these four things together in a tightly woven matrix. I should say I'm based here in Cambridge in the United Kingdom, and we are a terrific hotspot for technology-enabled growth. And so the last little piece of my talk will be talking about the Cambridge phenomenon, if you like, the Cambridge innovation ecosystem, which is technology-based, but very, very finely wrought, and produces exponential quantities of growth. And so what I thought when I was working in this space was, wouldn't it be lovely if we could look after the planet, look after people, take the lessons from the Cambridge Innovation Hub, all the wonderful success we're having here, and apply those things to this gap, this development gap we've got in developing economies, to make exponential quantities of growth in spaces where people need economic development. They need to be able to build their way out of pockets of poverty. Usually when people talk about this sort of thing, they talk about it being just missing middle economies in developing countries, but there are pockets of poverty everywhere. And this logic, this combined four pathways that I've laid out here, can be applied anywhere. So it's developmental thinking for sustainable, innovation-led, human-driven growth in the SME sector, but taking lessons from the technology sector. I'll show you what I mean. Exploring in more detail then. What do we mean by planetary economics? Well, the students that I was working with when I was making this model were very, very lovely, and they came from all kinds of places all over the world. And the work that I did with them, we took the United Nations rights of the child, and we put those through Kate Raworth's donut model of economics, which values things like biodiversity, the ozone layer, all sorts of things like that. And we came up with a list of core ideas, core themes that they really, as sort of the young Turks of economics, young Turks of business, the future business leaders of the world, what they felt were valuable. And they were very keen on things like biodiversity. They wanted to protect the ozone layer. They were desperately passionate about clean water and looking after the oceans. It was really interesting, actually. One of my students was from Oceania, sort of Asia-Pacific Rim area, and their entire economy, because they were from a small island, was a water-based economy. And we were sort of pushing a very, very strong message about looking after the natural environment, particularly the natural environment in the oceans. They were very, very passionate about that. And if you think about it, it's directly relevant because that's where their economy is based. Yes. So, so these things came through from the students. So there's value in these things. Without them, we can't sustain our operations. And so we should think about them when we're developing our economies, or even when we're doing business. The other side was the human core values. And these I'm really very passionate about. The fact that everyone has rights. You know, we have the right to speak, the right to think, the right to engage or choose not to at times. You know, these things are fundamental human rights. Yes. this idea of mutuality, that everybody is of value and of reciprocal value. So everybody's idea is a good one, and we need to work out together how to go forward. Core values of care, respect, thought, taking time to do things together. So essentially, both the planetary economics work from Kate Raworth, and the human core values stuff that's come through from the United Nations together, they make kind of, I suppose, a soft case for our economic endeavours, our trade, our position to trade out from. So that's the first two parts of the model. Okay. So they're the soft parts, the sort of warm, fuzzy parts of the model. They're also the strategic layer, the complex external layer of the model. The other two sectors, which I've represented, one with an economics chart, value in small to medium-sized enterprise growth, and the other, which I've represented with a wireless antenna, value in innovation, are both more concrete. They're the more kind of hard-nosed end of the model. So what's the argument here? Well, the work of Andreas Widmer, which again is very, very strong, very interesting, identified a number of key factors which could be used to leverage growth in developing economies. Essentially, what Andreas Widmer and Poverty Cure have done is they've looked at developed economies and they identified a number of metrics. They identified the fact that 95% of all firms in developed economies are small to medium-sized enterprises. And by that, we mean firms with 5 to 500 people. Okay. They also identified the fact that 65% of all jobs, of all employment, are in small to medium-sized enterprises. So these are big numbers, yeah? And then on top, they identified that the return on investment in SMEs, for every $1 spent, the return on investment is $12, which is a huge, sort of curve-breaking quantity of growth. So these are the core metrics, the core thinking. This is why we need to bounce SMEs in developing economies. This is the argument. Okay. If we look at missing middle economies, economies where there aren't many small to medium-sized enterprises, this is what we mean by the missing middle. There are micro businesses, little tiny firms of 1 to 5 people, and there are great big firms, you know, over 500 people, but there aren't many SMEs, 5 to 500 people. So what we're saying is that where there's a missing middle, where that lump in the curve is in the center of the model, there's an opportunity, a really strong opportunity to develop fast-paced, scalable growth for small to medium-sized enterprises, okay? So there are people in those spaces, those pockets of poverty, who could really do with bouncing out of the micro sort of business phase into the SME phase. And the strategy which Widmer proposes for doing that is to connect people to networks of productivity and exchange, which is super smart. In other words, there are people there making stuff. You know, there are people there who want to do stuff, engage with the world, but they're not connected. So one of the challenges we have is to work out ways of enabling the micro business to connect to networks of productivity and exchange, to grow into a small to medium-sized enterprise. And one of the challenges we face is to work out how on earth we can connect small to medium-sized enterprises to networks of productivity and exchange, again, to enable them to leverage, to trade out. It's a scalable challenge, and it's something which is a useful scalable challenge, particularly looked at if you want to look at it in terms of the numbers, in terms of return on investment. So what we're saying then is, where there are pockets of poverty, if we take this human capital, we value trade and human capital and rights and so on, we value kind of a planetary view, a sustainable view of what we trade and how we trade, then we see there are some pockets of people who aren't trading out as efficiently as they might. And how can we help them do that? Well, we say the way to do that is through connecting to networks of productivity and of exchange, because that enables trade capability and it grows trade capacity. And when we grow trade capacity, then more trade occurs for the good of everyone, which ties back to the human core values inside the model. And we end up with this idea of everybody working well together, really. When we trade out in a complex global system, the global economy grows, which is good, but we do it in a considered, considerate, friendly way. I guess that's what I'm saying. And for those who like the numbers, we're saying, wow, there's a huge opportunity for return on investment of 1 to 12. So these were the first 3 threads inside the model. And then I thought, well, lucky me, I live in Cambridge. Cambridge is awesome. It's chock full of technology. It's chock full of development-led growth. It's chock full of sort of bright people doing interesting things. And it's really a super cool place to live. I've lived here a long time. I've been here 35 years. And when I first arrived, it's truthful to say that Cambridge wasn't quite as exciting a place to live as it is today. And so what I've done is I've kind of looked back through my own history of being here in Cambridge and thought about the development and change that we've seen. My own background is that I'm past industrial research fellow at the Institute for Manufacturing in Cambridge. And my specialism there was collaborative new product development. So I work a lot in innovation and business growth. And so when I say looking back over my own experience over the past 35 years, I really mean it's a bit of a busman's holiday, because I love looking at innovation, growth, business development. That's just what I do for a living. So what I wanted to identify were lessons from the Cambridge ecosystem, which is a beautifully defined ecosystem, because Cambridge is still kind of small enough as a city to be looked at as an object. Yes. So I wanted to identify lessons from that space to see what it was that made Cambridge grow so beautifully, and see if we could take some lessons from that and sprinkle them over the top of this idea that we needed to develop the missing middle. So take some of our ideas, seed them into the missing middle space, and see if we could leverage that growth, that 1 to 12, for the good of everybody. So the fourth element is this innovation-led growth, that there is value in innovation. And the 4 kind of key things that I've noted down here on the model are that we need flexible and supportive investment in infrastructure to leverage technology for growth. Stakeholder involvement, there needs to be a good political will. And well, here in Cambridge, obviously a knowledge economy, and we have very, very strong innovation capability. And what I'd like to do is just spend a few minutes exploring a bit more about those things in just a moment. So the model overall takes into account the growth of the missing middle. Here we are. Okay, the innovation context, the planetary economic envelope, the human core values. And what we're trying to do with the model is get people to move away from aid, which is over there on the left-hand side, to a position where people can engender their own sustainable innovation-based growth to get them leveraged out of poverty and into a place where they can trade globally. And the argument inside the model is that to do that, we need political will, we need thought leadership and influence, which is what I guess the diff's about, And we need this huge element of consideration to valuing human capital. So what we say, people and ideas are really important to leverage growth in a sustainable way. So that's the core argument, I guess. But it is a strategic layer model. So that's the new model. Just a couple of words then about the innovation capital element, which is where I can, I guess, really add value from the Cambridge point of view. Having looked at Cambridge and its growth pattern over the last 35 years, there are a number of things which feature now, which weren't necessarily as obvious a few years ago. And I think one of the things about Cambridge is that it has an extremely finely woven lattice of innovation capability. So a lot of things that are beautifully crafted are woven together to make something very, very useful indeed. So it's well constructed. If we look at the first thread inside leveraging innovation, the first thread is capital. It's well, capital in the sense of money. And if you're a small to medium enterprise here in Cambridgeshire and you're in the tech sector, there are probably 4 main spaces in which you can go to get money. It's quite a useful thing to do. The big sources of investment in the region, in terms of in Cambridge, the first thing is that we have a lot of large-scale capital growth companies. So companies like AstraZeneca, companies like, we've got Google come, we've got Amazon's arriving. Somehow it's almost like bees to a honey pot, thank goodness for us here in Cambridge. Large companies are coming and they're bringing their capital with them. So they're choosing to invest in the region. And the question is why? Because Cambridge is an interesting little spot, but it started, many, many hundreds of years ago as a quiet market town and didn't grow very fast at all until the late 1970s. But it does now. And I think the reason it's connected now is because obviously we have digital innovation. We can communicate much more readily digitally than we ever could before. But what we've got coming through are large-scale capital growth companies. And the reason that they're coming is that they are clustering around the world-leading research and intellect that we have here at Cambridge. Cambridge University, is really building new knowledge, properly new knowledge, all of the time. And the large businesses are realizing that if they cluster together around innovation in, biotechnology or pharma, big pharma, that sort of space, wireless technology, they're all coming because we know what we're doing, and what we're doing is at the front of world thinking. So that's why people are coming. But when they come, when the big firms come, they bring a lot of people, they bring a lot of new business to the area, they have a requirement for new housing, new corporate headquarters, all of those things. And all of that money comes into the Cambridge ecosystem. So not only they're coming for our world-leading research and the intellect that they find here, but also they're coming because their competitors are coming. And so they're forming clusters and they're starting to collaborate. And it's really very interesting indeed. So that's the first one. The second thing that we have access to here in Cambridge is venture capital, which is sort of moderately large pots of money, usually invested for 5 to 10 years. And these are sort of your pension fund type investors or investment bankers handling investment capital for people. And they invest in highly educated international teams. Those sort of teams, usually high energy with focused IP technology. So if you go to any kind of event here in Cambridge, you'll find people saying, oh, how much IP have you got? And how many patents have you got? And that sort of thing. It's a very common thing to talk about. And so the investors are looking at which technical spaces they can invest in, and they're sort of predicting their returns in 5 to 10 years. Nowadays, we've got a slight transition in that evergreen capital thinking is gaining ground, and that's extremely good for the growth of SMEs, because what evergreen capital is, it's where a venture capital group will invest, but towards their exit time, they will look again and continue to invest in the business if they think that it's going to go forward. And that's particularly useful for longer term research and development projects, such as those found in medtech or, for example, graphene. You know, we've got something like a 22-year cycle to maturity. You need evergreen capital, because if someone pulls funding out after 5 or 10 years, you're a bit stuffed. So evergreen's a nice way of thinking. The third one is angel investors and owner capital. Angel investors are people who normally have smaller tranches of capital to invest, and they often bring a good book of contacts, and they will bring a really strong passion for the business that they invest in. And they really help people grow their business in a very concrete, sensible, intelligent way. So we're lucky to have quite a few of those around the place. The fourth thing is government and regional hub investment, which is publicly funded, sort of taxation-based help. So we might have innovation centres which are publicly funded. We've got the Bradfield Centre at the moment just opened here in Cambridge, which is 50% government funded, 50% Trinity College funded. And these spaces are spaces where people can get together, collaborate, help each other understand their businesses, find new opportunities, grow. There's a lot of training available, a lot of knowledge sharing, a lot of knowledge sharing events. All of those things help support the infrastructure to help Cambridge trade out into the world. And the final thing is just local investment, you know, old school businesses that are growing, sort of going to the bank for money, non-technology businesses, but halo growth. So they include things like support businesses, law firms. We've got quite a few law firms coming here because of the IP, and there's work to be done. Quite a few property firms coming because there's so much building. So all these are support businesses, not really technology based, but again, they're investment in the region. So these 5 sources of capital growth are definitely matrix and sort of finely refined in the space. On top, and that's the money side, on top of that, we have a huge number of capabilities and awarenesses that are very much inside the ecosystem. Huge technical capabilities, so an ability to translate blue skies thinking into real products. I mean, that's where my work on new product innovation came in. We were looking at hard physical sciences and how people collaborate in that space to make new real products and get them to market. So good technical capability. Strong research capability. Obviously, we've got the university here, world leading research in many, many fields, and that knowledge base and ability to research and persevere and grow new knowledge, that's invaluable in today's knowledge economy. Entrepreneurial awareness. There's an awful lot of work done, training engineers, managers, creatives in how to be entrepreneurial, how to make risky choices and make them slightly less risky, how to work together, all that side of things. The entrepreneurship gene, if you like, is very much in the space. I've already talked about investment funds. We have people, skilling people for business, innovation management skills. That's an additional skill set. So often you have to have a technical capability, a research capability, entrepreneurial awareness, investment, business and innovation skills before you can even get off the ground with an innovation-based, a technology innovation-based business. There's also a lot of infrastructure support. I mean, I mentioned the professional services firms moving into the region, but beyond that, we have local area partnerships from government, which stretch right across the region. We have new practical infrastructure. We have having new roads being built. I mean, huge quantities of new roads. And on top, we have wonderful, wonderful, high quality, sustained, intelligent business and technology networks where people can get together, exchange ideas, grow ideas in leading edge ways. And that helps business grow because you make contacts, you know people who can help you with your product to take it the next stage on. So my argument in this model is, yes, we need to be green and lovely. Yes, we can leverage the missing middle and make growth happen in spaces which are at the moment not growing. And yes, there are some wonderful lessons that we can take forward here from Cambridge. And my view is that the strategic considered application of innovation capital, which is what all of these things added together are, innovation capital, within the Cambridge ecosystem, makes for long-term sustainable innovation-led economic growth. So that's basically how we do it in Cambridge. And it would be really lovely if we could share those ideas to bounce less developed economies. And that's basically the argument. So blending planetary values, the donut model, human capital, which is the United Nations rights piece, innovation capital, which we've just been through, as a context for building fast-paced growth in missing middle economies. Yeah, that's a good beginning. And it would be wonderful if we could see if we could make it happen. And just one final slide, a few references, and thanks to my lovely students, who I promised I would put on my slides if ever I published the model. So there we go. And also thanks to family and friends. Okay, I'm going to try and go back to Marina now, if I can. I'm not very good at the technology, but we'll try. Oops.
Wonderful. Thank you, Claire. I'll jump in again briefly. So thanks for the slide presentation there. I wanted to follow up with a quick question, actually. I was really enjoying this discussion, I guess, thinking about how we can move or need to move micro businesses up to the small to medium enterprise stage in order to stimulate and retain growth. I was wondering, are there any examples of communities where this has happened previously?
It's a really interesting question. I'm trying to think. I suppose of itself, Cambridge is an example because when I first moved here, it took us, for example, well over an hour, 2 hours to go to London. And if anything needed to happen, everyone would go to London from Cambridge. And now people from London are coming to Cambridge. So I guess, yeah, Cambridge is an example of itself. But you asked me if there was anywhere else in the world, didn't you?
Yes, I guess wondering specifically in the developing sections as well. Yeah.
I'm not sure I can answer that. Perhaps Marina can, because she's from Uruguay and she might know some examples. What do you think, Marina? Oh, no, Marina's not on sound. Didn't mean to put her on the spot. I don't know. I'm from the Northeast myself, and we have great many pockets of less well-off people, which I suppose gives me a great passion for seeing spaces develop, which need to be developed. Yeah, does that help?
Excellent. Well, it's obviously a concept that we really need to be promoting if we don't have any solid examples yet of cities that have managed to go through it. Oh, sorry, not in that sense. Of we do need to. So saying, yeah, it's obviously identified a real gap that's existing.
Well, I certainly think the work of Poverty Cure and Andres Widmer, if you want to read that work, that is really wonderful and really fleshes out that space. But I mean, my interest was to take the Cambridge, because Cambridge is exponential growth, and we're full of, we're a bunch of smart cookies. So hopefully we can take what we're doing and really help people with it. I think that was the idea.
Perfect. Thanks. So yeah, jumping over to Marina then to continue the discussion.
Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you. Well, thank you, Claire, for your presentation. And I'm hoping I'm going to bring slightly complementary view on the matter, probably influenced by where I come from, which, as Claire said, is Uruguay in South America, and it's where I'm based at the moment. So Claire talked about many things. I'm going to focus on some of them. So particularly, she talked about the importance of human capital, the value of human capital, the importance of being connected, and how Cambridge has highly educated people, and how that's very important to leverage sustainable growth. So while I was preparing this talk, I came across with this concept that I'm going to share with you today. You've probably seen it before. It's the concept of democratizing innovation. So let me just share the slides with you. Second. Okay. So so there's this idea about democratizing innovation, right? I came across with this book by Eric von Hippel, and I thought, what a good concept, right? So, in a way, the more I read, the more confused I was, so to speak, because I was, on one hand, I was fascinated by the concepts it presented. But at the same time, it was like I wasn't convinced that there was something that didn't make sense. And finally, I discovered what it was, and I'll share it with you that today. So I want to share with you one of the main statements, and it reads: innovation is rapidly becoming democratized. Users, aided by improvements in computer and communications technology, increasingly can develop their own new products and services. It's the emerging system of user-centered innovation. So I thought, okay, user-centered innovation, it kind of means we have the power, the ability to develop exactly what we need for ourselves. We can also benefit from others that freely share their innovation. So like our ability to innovate seems to be increasing rapidly, which it's a great advantage if we compare it to past models where we depended on other people to create, to produce, and potentially to innovate. So this is what was explained in the book and the concept of user-centered innovation. So I asked myself, okay, I understand this, but without having read this, if somebody had asked me what I understood by democratizing innovation, I'm not sure what I would have said. So like, what do people actually understand when they are asked about innovation being democratized? So I decided to ask some people what they understood by this, okay? And here are some of the answers. I tried to summarize them. The answers really vary. I'm not here to judge them, of course. Some of them talked about having an open forum where anybody can propose and share ideas. Others talked about how not only the illuminated are capable of innovating. They talked about access, right? Access to the possibility of innovating, access to tools, okay, to knowledge, to people. So I don't know, I felt sometimes we're a bit too focused on formal definitions and we forget to ask what people actually think or feel about something. I actually searched for the formal definition of democratizing innovation and there's no agreement. So I'm just gonna consider what people said. There are many interesting concepts here. They talk about generating change. They talk about decision making. They talk about access. And this is related. This relates very well to another concept that is presented in the book. the idea of access and the idea of innovation. I said improved access to easy-to-use tools and components for innovation leads to increased ability to innovate. So when I read this, again, there was something that didn't make sense to me. It's not my intention to criticize at all. It's like I'm actually very grateful for having read this, because it made me reflect upon certain things from a different perspective. But basically, it means that the more access we have, so the more our ability to innovate increases. So it's like there's something missing here. There's something overlooked, and this is too important to ignore. So I'd like to give you an example just to illustrate what I mean by this. And I'm going to bring something that's from my country again, something that has happened and has been happening here in the past 10 years. I don't know how much you know about Uruguay. It's a small country between Argentina and Brazil in South America. It qualifies as a developing country. So 10 years ago, Plan Ceibal, which you can read there, was created, and it's a program inspired in the One Laptop per Child program. So Plan Ceibal is an initiative to foster social inclusion and to bridge the gap between the socially favored and the socially disadvantaged in terms of access to technology and internet. So the initial compromise 10 years ago was to give one laptop per child and per primary teacher an internet connection to all public schools. Uruguay was the first country in the world to provide one laptop to every primary school student then. This was mostly done in the first 5 years of the program. So the focus was on technical aspects, not pedagogical ones. So one of the conclusions from this first stage was that having given the computers without training to teachers ended up in teachers not knowing how to integrate them in their teaching practices. But since the objective was merely access, then this was certainly achieved. So the following stage focuses on the pedagogic use of technology in the teaching practices. And it was found that there's little information on how computers are used and on the impact of them in the teaching practices in terms of quality. So the next stage focuses on quality. One of the recommendations made by Michael Fulham, that it's a recognized Canadian educational researcher. So he wrote this report for this program, for Plan Ceibal. And he focuses on training people, right? He says that we should focus on developing new capacities, new abilities and skills that will allow big scale change. So the priority must be training individuals and giving them support. So what can we take from this experience, and how is this related to access and to innovation? So if we go back to this, so what's overlooked here in this equation, so to speak? For me, what's missing here is education. It's quality education. Education understood as a broad term, in the sense of training, instruction. And why am I focusing on this particularly? Why is this so important in these days where we've got, disruptive technologies invading our lives, automatization, technological advances go faster than ever. I remember 2 years ago, Anthony Giddens said, this is an unprecedented era of fast-paced change. So we've got the Moore's law driving change. So again, why do I think, and obviously other people think, that quality education can make a difference? Well, there's unfortunately, there's a downside to all this, to all these technological advances. And they can actually have a quite negative effect on some people and on some countries or some regions. So why? In the past, according to some authors, economic wealth was measured in production capability or access to raw materials. But nowadays, as the OECD claims, human capital represents 2/3 of economic wealth. So lack of quality education actually polarizes the market and the economy. And this is exactly what's happening in certain developing regions like Latin America. So the thing is, technological advances only favor the highly educated ones and actually make the gap larger. So there's been a lot of discussion about changes in the labor market, right, and automatization. And this, unfortunately, is only favoring the prepared ones, and it's putting aside the uneducated ones. So the gap between the educated and uneducated, or prepared and unprepared, is becoming larger, as is the innovation possibility and economic development for certain people and for certain regions. And why is this happening? Well, again, there's been a lot of discussion about this. This is not new. The answer is probably not a mystery, but there's a disconnection between the educational system and the market. And I think Cambridge, and going back to Claire's points, Cambridge is actually a very good example of, in a positive way, of this, of that connection between the educational system and the market. I remember when I was living there, Kevin Kelly, who's the founder and director of Wired magazine, summarizes this idea very well for me. It's companies where only 10% of the people think will not survive. You can actually extend this to regions or to countries or the world itself. So going back to Claire's point about Cambridge. So what does Cambridge have? What does Cambridge do? Why do they do so well? I'm just summarizing some of her points because I think it wraps it up very efficiently. It's like Claire talked about having highly educated people in partnerships, and again, the value of human capital, and how the Cambridge competitive ecosystem blends a lot of things like technical capabilities and research capabilities on entrepreneurial awareness, and many other things that she already discussed. I don't want to be repetitive. When I was once at a conference back in Cambridge, and it was Dr. David Cleverly. He's an entrepreneur for Cambridge. He said that Cambridge is a low-risk place to do high-risk things. And true. I was just like, it's a very nice way of putting it. So I asked myself, well, how can we replicate this? How can we learn from this? I think I don't know if I've said it, but I'm an industrial designer. I'm currently working in the world of entrepreneurship education. I've learned, whether I like it or not, is it's too big of a task to be left only to designers. So, and I mean here design in the broad sense, design in the sense of being able to empathize, to see and to depending on your philosophical views, you either see them or you find them or you create them. To be able to come up with solutions that are feasible from a technological and business perspective. I think that for this to happen, we involved. Okay. Again, it all comes down to people, and this is what I want to focus on. At this point, there are so many theories, so many tools, so many methodologies. I just shortlisted some of them. About all of them. So we've got design thinking, which has been trending in the past 10 years. We've got from Sarah Sarsvati. We've got frugal innovation that focuses on innovating with fewer resources, sprint, and then everything related to lean startup, human-centered design with broader concept. We've got theory U for leadership, and many more of these. But is when we use, I think we need to understand that if we want to have successful SMEs and startups, we need to empower people, and we need to educate them, and we need to train them in design and entrepreneurship skills, which again, Claire touched on this point, because technology won't be the answer alone. So access to technology alone be the answer, let alone for the more, and there's proof of this. So how many times, I wonder, like, how many times we've heard in, pitching competitions, the phrase, like, it's not so much about the idea, it's the team, the people behind it. This. I think I don't know if I've said it, but I'm an industrial designer. I'm currently working in the world of entrepreneurship education. And one thing I've learned, whether I like it or not, is design is too big of a task to be left only to designers. So, and I mean here design in the broad sense, design in the sense of being able to empathize, to see and to create opportunities, depending on your philosophical views. You either see them or you find them or you create them. To be able to come up with solutions that are feasible from a technological and business perspective. And I think that for this to happen, we need to get people involved, okay? So again, it all comes down to people, and this is what I want to focus on. At this point, there are so many theories, so many tools, so many methodologies. I just shortlisted some of them. You've probably heard about all of them. So we've got design thinking, which has been trending in the past 10 years. We've got effectuation from Sarah Sarsvati. We've got frugal innovation that focuses on innovating with fewer resources. We've got design sprint, and then everything related to lean startup. Human-centered design, which is kind of a broader concept. We've got theory U for leadership, and there are many more of these. But my focus is, no matter which one we use, I think we need to understand that if we want to have successful SMEs and startups, we need to train people, we need to empower people, and we need to educate them. We need to train them in design and entrepreneurship skills, which again, Claire touched on this point. Because access to technology won't be the answer alone. So access to technology alone won't be the answer, let alone for the more unfavored ones. And there's proof of this. So how many times, I wonder, like, how many times we've heard in, pitching competitions, the phrase, like, it's not so much about the idea, it's the team, or is the people behind it. So I feel we should really start focusing on the people, give people what they need, empower them, educate them. So to finish, I just want to share with you what Paulo Freire once said. And education doesn't change the world; it changes the people that change the world. So, well, this is it from my side. I'm happy to answer any questions that may arise.
Sorry, maybe. Hi, so you've probably noticed I'm wearing slightly different clothes, and so is Claire. So unfortunately, at the end of the last session, we had a slight technical issue, but luckily we only missed maybe 2 minutes of the discussion, and we will have coming some slightly more comments from Marina to fill in at that spot. Luckily, we've got Claire again to join us just to wrap up the session today. So I guess bringing everyone back into the conversation that we were having and reminding Claire and I where we were at, I actually really liked the start of Claire's conversation where she was discussing around combining environmental values plus human core values, and as well really talking about the role of the small to medium enterprises in stimulating economic growth. Then in Marina's, I really loved the comment around democratizing innovation. It's something I hadn't really thought of before, and I really loved how she'd brought in a whole bunch of people's perspectives on what that actually meant to them. But returning to Claire now to actually just get her final thoughts, I was actually very interested after the discussion in the role of Cambridge as an example or representative of the model that she was discussing. So I'd like to hand over to her for a few comments.
Oh, thank you. I must admit, I'm 100% with you on this idea of human capital and democratizing innovation. I think they're really smart strategies for fast-paced change, which is really what we want. The whole idea of the model was to see if we could get people to almost jump a curve in terms of innovation. And I think the way that Cambridge helps with that is in providing this sort of métier, this way of thinking about leveraging innovation. So the infrastructure and the technology base and the networks that we have here are really the things that, if we can understand properly how to grow those in a really smart way and fast, then take those as seeds and pop those in other places, then we get lots of very little sort of fast sprouts coming up. And that's what we want. If we can make lots of fast sprouts, then we can get a jungle very quickly. Yes. So that's kind of the idea. Sorry, does that help? I tend to be a bit vague sometimes, but.
Excellent. No, I think, yeah, so you're saying it's finding that example idea that works and then trying to catalyze that in lots of different places so that we get the speed that we need.
Absolutely. True. If you can, yeah, it's true. If you look at Cambridge and some of the innovation spaces that we have here, we have spin-outs from the university that are co-located with support infrastructure literally on the doorstep. So we have somewhere called Idea Space, or the Hauser Forum, for example, which is a beautiful big glass palace of wonderfulness. But actually, it's not so much the architecture, although the architecture is fantastic. It's what happens inside it and the way that the space has been designed. Again, popping designs straight back in the front of developing spaces for innovation. The space is made in such a way that we can all get together to do interesting things. For example, we have PhD conferences where everyone comes to share their work. We have professional networking events where everybody comes to talk about specific topics. It could be something as simple as Watson, artificial intelligence, or it can be graphene, or it can be one nucleus and biotechnology. And all of these things are happening very, very close, very, very proximate. But if you look, if you sort of go out helicopter view, which is what I tend to do, and look at actually what that network means, how that network exists in space, that's the thinking that we need to take and pop everywhere to make the sprouts. So it's not so much, do you see what I mean? Because then people can make their own biotech and their own graphene and all those sorts of things. But if they have that infrastructure, that way of thinking about engendering conditions for innovation that we have made and learned here, if we can replicate that, then that's the way forward, I think. Sorry.
Excellent. No, thanks, Claire. And I was lucky to get you to answer my questions in person, but I do know Claire's actually been going through and answering any questions that you're posting under the videos as well. So certainly comment if you've got anything else you'd like to get
Claire's thoughts on. So apart from that, I'd like to say a huge thank you again to Claire Rose and Marina Milani for joining us for this conversation. And thanks to you for joining us for the DIF 2017. Luckily, we're just in the first week at the moment, so there's still 2 more weeks of plenty of talks to get involved with. I'll actually be hosting another one this evening, so it's Thursday night if you'd like to join me for that. Otherwise, at the moment, catching up on the DIF Live launch, I'd also highly recommend. That was a great event. Apart from that, thanks for joining us again, and we'll see you in some of the other conversations. And so thanks, Claire.
Thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure. Okay, take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.